The Legend of Zelda is a mystical fantasy series with many timelines around the hero, princess, and the king of evil. There are many different tales around these characters and relics like the Master Sword and Triforce. But no matter how many timelines there are or how many eons pass between entries, every tale has a beginning. Every legend has an origin. That is where today comes in. The Nintendo Wii's Zelda title has come to not only handhelds, but a lot of gamers that didn't get a chance to see the origins of this epic series. Packed with new control styles and quality of life changes to adjust it for Nintendo's hybrid console. Here is my review of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD for the Nintendo Switch. Skyward Sword is the origin of the Zelda franchise. It takes place at the very beginning of the saga in a world above the clouds known as Skyloft. Here you play as Link, a young man aspiring to become one of the knights of this realm, taking part in a special test and ceremony with his childhood friend Zelda. But after the ceremony is over, a black tornado pulls Zelda from the sky into the unknown and mythical world below. Link chases after her, wanting to bring his friend back, but walking into a destiny far more significant. The story of Skyward Sword is very good, mostly from how much it adds and explains about the series in general. It is a good tale of a young man coming of age to tackle his destiny, but also gives fans a lot of information that was only speculated upon beforehand. When it comes to gameplay, this is a 3D action adventure game with lots of puzzles. Now before really diving in, let's talk about the additions and changes made to this HD remaster. Outside of the polished and upscaled visuals and performance, we have a number of quality of life changes. The biggest of this was with Fi, the game's companion. In the original, she constantly interrupted you with non-skippable bits of text along with other NPCs doing the same. She does still butt in a little too much in certain areas, but the vast majority of these advice segments have been reduced to a toggleable button so you have control on when you want to hear her talk. Other enhancements include skippable cutscenes outside of hero mode, multiple control styles, autosave, and 3 manual save slots instead of just the one. The latter enhances hero mode as you can start a new game in that mode whenever you wish after beating the game for the first time. Now let's get to game progression. Unlike most Zelda titles, this is not an open world adventure. The overall map is divided into regions you can explore but are not connected to the other regions. Instead, you go from region to region by going through save points and returning to the sky world above. This allows you to fly on a giant bird in a much larger open area, mostly geared towards returning to Skyloft to save in your bed or finding one of the portals to go to a different region. Now, as fans of the series know well, Skyward Sword was the last game they made before Breath of the Wild and has that older style with large and intricate dungeons with lots of items you collect that are used for puzzles and navigation. There's a lot of fun puzzle solving to be had, but the game's real treat, and fault, is the sword play. This game was built around the Wii's motion controls and allowed you to move the Wiimote in certain directions for slashing your sword in that same direction. As such, the majority of the game's enemies and bosses were designed around one-on-one dueling and slashing at certain angles to be able to get past their defenses and fight against them. The Switch version maintains this with 2 different control styles. One that lets you slash with your Joy-Con's motion controls and another that lets you slash by moving the right analog stick in the direction you want. The latter being the only way you can play the game on the Switch Lite without extra Joy-Cons. Once you get these controls down, it is a ton of fun to get into a duel with a Stalfos, bashing your shield and carefully swinging your sword through its weak point. But getting there is the hard part. Neither of these control styles are completely fluid. The motion style is difficult to swing properly, and the button style sacrifices the ability to freely move the camera without holding the L trigger as you do it. Both of these feel fairly clunky and take a good bit of time to adjust to. Now all of this comes together for a very long adventure, sometimes a bit too long. I enjoyed my time with Skyward Sword, though I feel like some of the backtracking questing you do is a bit excessive. Not all of the things you do are guilty of this, but one specific quest had you looking for something. And to get there, you had to do a trial to get a navigation item that can get you into the area where you find an NPC that tells you where the item is. And then you go there only to find someone else there to send you on a different side mission through an entire dungeon you already cleared, just to go back to them and finally be pointed towards the dungeon that you were looking for in the first place. It felt like that segment had way too much padding for its own good. But the game does give you a lengthy adventure, far longer than I expected. I mostly stuck to the main quest, veering off for a side quest or two to get a certain iconic shield, and managed to beat the game after playing for around 35 hours. It may cost a little more than the game initially was on the Wii, but it's got plenty of content to back it up. Next up is presentation. Visually, the game looks pretty similar to the Wii version, but with polished and upscaled visuals. Everything looks nice and smooth, though you can definitely tell it is more polished than redone with the way some of the textures look. But considering the graphics don't really drop at all in handheld mode, it really has a nice smoothness to it. With performance, things are wonderful. The game runs at a constant 60 frames per second in both docked and handheld modes, and it never gave me issues. So next, let's go into battery life, which also gave us some pretty impressive results. On the original model, Skyward Sword HD gives us a battery range of 4 hours to 5.5, with the Switch Lite giving us 4 hours to almost 6. And the Redbox or V2 2019 model gives us a range of 5 hours to over 7. In conclusion, Skyward Sword brings the origin of the Zelda franchise to the handheld world with some enhancements along for the ride. Now on the downside, both control styles feel pretty clunky and take a lot of adjustment to learn and use properly, and some parts of the questing feel like they have a little too much padding for their own good. But once you get the controls down, it has incredibly fun swordplay and a really great story that will teach series fans how it all got started. Reviews to go rates The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD for the Nintendo Switch an 8.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.